Everyone in the room had stopped talking the moment the general walked in, his polished boots striking the concrete like a gavel, calling the court to order. And when he looked around and pointed at the lone female operator standing silently near the table's edge and growled, "Soldier, identify yourself. What's your call sign?" Nobody expected the air to go that still, or the room to get that cold. But when she finally raised her eyes and replied in a quiet, deliberate voice, "Spectre 6, you could feel every breath in the briefing hall get sucked out like a gunshot had gone off. Because Spectre 6 wasn't just a name, it was a ghost. A shadow from a mission buried so deep even most Black Ops commanders refused to say it out loud. And now here she was in flesh and blood, alive when she wasn't supposed to be, walking into a base that had once held a funeral for her with an empty casket and folded flag. And if the general looked shaken, it wasn't just because she existed, but because of what her return meant. For him, for the Pentagon, and for everyone who had signed off on Operation Winter Veil 6 years ago, when an elite recon team went dark during a hostage rescue in northern Syria, and Spectre 6 had gone missing in the blizzard of silence that followed. Presumed KIA. But now she stood with no unit patch, no insignia, and no explanation except the classified burn scars running up her neck and the blank-eyed calm of someone who'd seen things that rewired her soul. And while the younger officers exchanged confused glances, those who had been in the game long enough froze like statues, because they remembered the after-action report that never went public, the one that mentioned a rogue operative turning on the mission, the one that whispered rumors of a betrayal deep in the ranks and an unauthorized exfil that violated every protocol but saved 11 lives. Only no one knew who pulled that off. And now the general was staring straight at her with that tremor in his jaw that no rank could hide. Because if she was back, she either wanted revenge, redemption, or answers. And none of those options were safe for him, especially not when she reached into her pouch and dropped a scorched dog tag on the table with the name Captain Bryce Langston, carved in fractured steel, his son's name, the commander who died that night on Spectre's last mission, the one the general never forgave himself for. And now the room wasn't just silent, it was suffocating. The junior staff pretending to look busy while keeping one eye fixed on the slow-burning war erupting between a ghost and a grieving father in full uniform. And then she said it, not loud, not angry, but like a final sentence etched in marble. "Your son died saving me." Not the other way around, and the words cracked through the air like lightning striking stone, because that wasn't the official version. The files said Spectre 6 broke orders and left the team. And now she was flipping that story on its head, with the only living proof being the scar across her temple, and the encrypted drive. She slid forward with a quiet, "Watch this before you speak again." And as she turned and walked away, the general didn't stop her, didn't shout. He just stared at the tag like it was bleeding, and nobody moved until the screen flickered on and the footage rolled, grainy helmet cam, sandstorm blur. And there it was, Bryce Langston dragging her through fire, taking 3 rounds to the chest, and using his last breath to punch in coordinates and whisper, "Tell my father she wasn't the traitor," before the feed cut to black. And suddenly the narrative changed, the legend collapsed, and Spectre 6 was no longer the shadow they erased, but the hero they buried twice. Once in war, and once in silence, and when the general rose, he didn't salute, didn't bark. He simply walked out the door and made a call to the defense secretary himself, because the truth was bigger than grief now. It was justice waiting to detonate, and the woman who'd been mocked, doubted, and erased was about to be reinstated, not just with rank, but with honor. Though she didn't wait for ceremony, she headed straight to the motor pool, where an old friend waited, Sergeant Cole, one of the 11 she'd saved, now retired and wearing a prosthetic leg, saluting her with tears he didn't wipe, saying, "Took you long enough, Spectre." And when they embraced, it wasn't for the cameras, it was for the ones they'd lost, the ones who never got to speak, the ones buried under missions that never made the news. And as the base slowly realized who she was, the mood shifted from curiosity to awe to a silence filled with regret, because this wasn't just a return, it was a reckoning. And when Spectre 6 was formally reactivated with full honors, she declined the press, declined the parade, and requested only one thing: access to the redacted files on Operation Winter Veil. And when they gave her that, she found what she needed: proof that someone inside the command structure had sold their coordinates for a payoff that cost lives. And with that, she triggered a court-martial that rocked the intelligence community to its bones, because one of the names she uncovered was still active duty, Colonel Marcus Wexler, the same man who had ordered her expunged from the records and reassigned her brother's team to a suicide op 2 weeks later. And when she testified, she didn't waver, didn't cry. She recited call signs, timestamps, intercepted transmissions, and buried evidence like she'd been preparing for this every day since she crawled out of that Syrian cave, half dead and full of names. And when the court voted to strip Wexler of his stars and sentence him, she walked out without a word. And later, when a journalist finally caught up and asked what Spectre 6 meant, she said, "It means even ghosts can come back for the truth," and vanished from the public eye again, though years later a new elite recon unit would be formed under the name Ghost Flight 6, its emblem bearing a raven in flight and a quote beneath it: "Truth buried is still truth." And every operator in that unit knew its origin: a woman with no patch, no grave, and no fear, who stared down generals, rewrote history, and reminded the world that silence is not the same as justice.